So, imagine for a second that you're buying a house.
Okay, like a big house.
Right, yeah, huge house. And the home inspector hands you this absolute pristine 100-page safety report, right? It's got a gold seal on it, the whole 9 yards.
Sounds great so far.
Yeah. But then, and here's the catch, you find out the inspector never actually visited the house, like, at all.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The report was just auto-generated by some Python script, and the inspector, their name doesn't even exist in any registry.
That is, I mean, that's terrifying.
Right. Now, take that exact scenario, but imagine that house is actually the digital infrastructure holding, your medical records, your financial data, your passwords.
So basically the entire modern cloud.
Exactly. And that is exactly what we are unpacking today. Because in late March of 2026, a massive sector of the cloud it went down in flames.
It was a total disaster.
And the spark wasn't some sophisticated zero-day exploit from a nation-state hacking group. It was literally a spelling mistake in an auto-generated PDF.
Yeah, which is just wild to think about.
Today, we are looking at the Delve scandal.
Yeah.
And our mission for this deep dive is to really explore this shocking collapse of the boundary between, actual rigorous cybersecurity and what people in industry call compliance theater.
Right, because what we saw here was basically an entire ecosystem deciding to automate trust.
Oh.
And by doing that, they just ended up automating deception.
Exactly. We're looking at how a highly funded Silicon Valley startup literally built a machine to fabricate trust.
Yeah.
And how that exact illusion led directly to a devastating supply chain attack.
Yeah, we are going to get into the shady world of rubber stamp auditors. We'll talk about massive misconfigurations and eventually the LiteLLM hack that hit, over a third of all cloud environments?
36%. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's massive. But before we jump into the timeline, we really want to give a massive thank you to our sponsors who made this deep dive possible.
Absolutely.
I'm talking about www.compliancehub.wiki, www.breach.company, and www.cisomarketplace.com.
Their reporting on this was just phenomenal.
Oh, it's the bedrock of everything we're discussing today. The threat intelligence, the reverse engineering of the malware, all of it comes from their extensive reporting. So huge thanks to them.
Yeah, for sure. So to really understand how a massive chunk of the AI cloud ecosystem got compromised, we kind of have to start at the source, right?
We have to look at Delve.
Exactly, because Delve was the company promising this revolutionary AI native security future. But in reality, they were operating something closer to a digital sweatshop of manual forms.
It's so crazy. Let's talk about the background of Delve first, because I think it explains why so many incredibly smart, highly technical people just bought into this illusion completely.
Oh, the pedigree was flawless.
Right. So Delve was founded back in 2023 by two people, Karun Kaushik and Selim Kokalar. And these two had, the ultimate Silicon Valley golden ticket.
They really did. They were MIT dropouts, right?
Yeah, MIT dropouts who met as freshmen. They were Forbes 30 under 30 alumni. They went through Y Combinator in 2024.
Which is, basically the Harvard of startup accelerators.
Exactly. And by July of 2025, they had raised $32 million. And the Series A was led by Insight Partners.
And look, Insight Partners is not some boutique, easily fooled firm. I mean, they are a massive venture capital player.
So how did they miss this?
Well, you have to look at the macroeconomic climate of 2024 and 2025. We were in the absolute peak of the AI hype cycle.
Oh, the bubble was huge.
Right. If you just attach the phrase agentic AI to your pitch deck, you could basically bypass a significant amount of traditional technical due diligence.
Because everyone was just terrified of missing out.
Exactly. The FOMO among venture capitalists completely overrode standard risk assessment.
And honestly, if you look at their pitch, it was undeniably intoxicating. If you're a startup founder, you know the absolute pain of enterprise procurement.
Oh, it's agonizing.
Right. You have this massive deal on the table with a Fortune 500 company, and the only thing standing between you and $1 million in revenue is getting a SOC 2 Type 2 certification, or ISO 27001, or IPA.
And historically, that takes months. You have to do internal audits, hire consultants, tie up your engineering team.
Which is just a nightmare when you're trying to ship product.
Yeah.
So Delve walks into that pain point and they say, hey, our agentic AI will do this for you in days.
I mean, days instead of months. It's the ultimate pitch.
But the reality, when researchers later dismantled the Delve platform, what did they actually find?
They found almost no artificial intelligence whatsoever.
Wow, none at all.
I mean, basically none. It was essentially this very expensive, very polished web interface for static templates.
So it's just a glorified form builder.
Pretty much. And, this gets to the core of the problem with these GRC platforms, governance, risk, and compliance tools. They completely distort the concept of continuous monitoring.
Right, because real security engineering requires telemetry. You need to know that your endpoints are secure every second of every day.
Exactly. But Delve's process, it forced users to manually take point-in-time screenshots. Like they would literally ask you to open your Mac firewall settings, take a screenshot, and manually upload it to their form.
Which is, I mean, it's like buying a Fitbit that just automatically logs 10,000 steps for you the second you strap it on, whether you move or not.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Because it fundamentally invalidates the entire concept of a security control.
Right.
Like, if you upload a screenshot showing your local firewall is active at 10:00 a.m., the auditor has absolutely no mechanism to know if you turned that firewall off at 10:05 a.m. to download some random unauthorized application.
It's static evidence in a completely dynamic environment.
Yeah, you're passing the test while the actual infrastructure is actively bleeding.
And what's worse is that the platform actually encouraged this fabrication,
Yeah.
like with the board meeting minutes.
Oh, the board meetings. Yeah. If you needed to prove that your company holds regular board of directors meetings to discuss security risks, Delve didn't ask you for your actual minutes.
No, they just handed you pre-written ones.
Right. They just supplied default risk assessments, default incident response logs. You literally just clicked accept on a meeting that never happened.
They transformed the burden of proof into a multiple-choice quiz where they already filled in the correct answers for you.
Exactly. And the most audacious part of this was their trust pages feature.
Oh, the trust pages. Yeah, if you've ever evaluated a vendor, you know what these are. It's that public-facing URL you send to procurement that shows all your green check marks.
Right, like SOC2 compliant, GDPR ready, pen tested.
But what did Delve do with these pages?
So the investigation revealed that clients were given a fully populated trust page displaying green check marks for highly advanced security controls before they had even started implementing them.
Before they did any work.
Yes. The trust page would broadcast to the public that the startup had, continuous vulnerability scanning, that they had executed a 200-hour external penetration test, and that they had mobile device management MDM deployed across their entire fleet.
While the startup had literally 0 of those controls in place.
0. And the sources explicitly point out that Delve didn't even support MDM integration at the API level.
Boy, they didn't even have the API for it.
No, their entire method for device management was that manual screenshot upload we just talked about.
That is unbelievable. Yet you have these Fortune 500 procurement teams looking at these bright green check marks and just rubber stamping the vendor approvals.
Which brings us to the principal agent problem.
Right. Explain that for people who might not know the term.
So specifically applied to enterprise procurement, the
Yeah.
principal is the enterprise, the big company whose data actually needs protecting. The agent is the procurement analyst tasked with verifying the vendor.
Okay.
Now, the analyst's incentive is not actually to secure the data. Their incentive is to process the vendor application quickly so the business unit can start using the software.
So they just want to clear their desk.
Exactly. If they see a green check mark on a beautifully designed trust page, they have professional cover. They check the box and move on. Delve basically weaponized that exact bureaucratic blind spot.
They weaponized it, and they wrapped it in this layer of technical deceit that is frankly staggering. Like, let's talk about their integrations.
Oh, the integration lie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
During their sales pitches, the Delve founders would claim they had over 100 live integrations with external systems.
They told clients the platform would automatically pull telemetry from AWS, from Gusto for HR, from GitHub.
But when security researchers actually looked at the source code of the Delve application, it was a completely different story.
The math was undeniable. Out of those claimed 100 integrations, only 14 actually contained functional API connections.
14 out of 100. So what were the other 86 doing?
Well, over 80 of them had a back-end Boolean flag. It was called auth required, and it was just hard-coded to false.
So it wasn't even asking for authentication.
Right. They didn't initiate an oath flow. They didn't require an API key. They were literally just empty HTML form fields with the logo of a third-party application, like Datadog or CrowdStrike, rendered on top.
Just asking the user to manually upload a picture.
It was pure UI smoke and mirrors.
And they escalated that smoke and mirrors with a feature they called pathways.
Yeah, pathways.
Yeah.
They marketed this as a proprietary enterprise-tier GRC workflow engine that they had built from scratch.
And they were charging a fortune for it.
Oh,
right?
yeah. They were quoting clients upwards of $40,000 a year just for access to this specific module.
Which is wild because it wasn't proprietary at all.
Not even a little bit.
They literally took an open source workflow tool called SimStudio, stripped out all the attribution, swapped the SimStudio logo for the Delve logo,
Yeah.
and sold it as a revolutionary AI invention.
It takes an unbelievable level of technical arrogance to assume nobody in the developer community would eventually inspect the DOM and recognize the underlying framework.
Right. Like developers look under the hood. That's what they do.
Always. But, selling clunky software or heavily marketing an open source wrapper makes you a deceptive vendor. It's bad, but the legal weight of compliance doesn't actually come from the software vendor.
Oh, right. It comes from the auditor.
Exactly. The independent auditor who physically signs the final attestation report.
Which means this entire machine that Delve built completely relies on the auditors being complicit.
Yes.
If you have an ecosystem where hundreds of startups are essentially buying fake hall passes,
Yeah.
there has to be a breaking point where the paper fiction crashes into reality.
And that breaking point happened in late December of 2025.
The spreadsheet leak.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a catastrophic operational failure that just exposed the entire underbelly of the compliance as a service market.
So an anonymous whistleblower who goes by the pseudonym Deep Delver blasted an email to hundreds of Delve clients, and attached to that email was a link to a publicly accessible Google spreadsheet.
And just let's pause on that for a second. The fact that a company selling military-grade cybersecurity compliance was managing its core audit pipeline in an unauthenticated, publicly exposed Google sheet.
I mean, the irony is physically painful.
It completely bypasses any concept of identity and access management. But the true disaster wasn't the exposure of the sheet itself, it was the contents.
Well, within it.
That spreadsheet contained direct links to 493 draft SOC2 reports for Delve's client base.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. These are documents that contain highly sensitive architectural diagrams, network topologies, executive sign-offs.
Basically a roadmap for attackers.
Exactly. And when threat researchers and journalists started downloading and analyzing those 493 reports, they found statistical impossibilities that just unraveled the whole company.
Let's look specifically at the 259 SOC2 Type 2 reports in that leak, because the distinction between a Type I and a Type 2 report is really the smoking gun here, isn't it?
It absolutely is. So a Type I report evaluates the design of your security controls at a specific point in time. It is a photograph of your infrastructure on a Tuesday.
Okay, pretty straightforward.
Right. But a Type 2 report is fundamentally different. It legally attests to the operating effectiveness of those controls over a continuous observation period.
Usually, what, 6 to 12 months?
Exactly. And the auditor is legally required to sample evidence over that entire timeline to prove that you consistently follow your own security policies.
Which makes what Deep Delver found completely absurd.
Oh, it's hilarious in a dark way. Out of those 259 Type 2 reports, evaluating completely different startups across different industries over a year-long period, every single report claimed the company experienced 0 security incidents.
Which is statistically highly improbable, but then there's the next metric.
Right. Every single one of those 259 reports also claimed the company experienced 0 personnel changes.
Nobody quit.
Nobody quit, nobody was fired, nobody was promoted or changed access roles for a whole year.
I mean, if you've ever worked at a tech startup, you know that going an entire year with 0 personnel turnover is practically impossible.
It doesn't happen.
To claim that 259 different startups all had 0 turnover simultaneously. That is pure statistical fiction.
And because of these fabricated 0 events, the auditor's conclusions for those specific controls were identical across all 259 reports.
Right, because they just said, well, the event never happened, so we couldn't test it.
Exactly. The auditor wrote verbatim that the operating effectiveness of those controls could not be tested because the triggering events never occurred.
They used a lack of data as the ultimate defense. But the researchers proved it wasn't just similar data, it was literally the exact same file being auto-generated.
Yeah, they found keyboard-mashed test values injected into the final reports.
Like literal developer test strings.
Yes, SDF and DLKJF showing up in the formal audit reports of real enterprise clients.
That's amazing. And the infrastructure descriptions were just as bad.
Oh, worse. In a SOC2 report, Section 3 requires a detailed, bespoke narrative of the company's network architecture.
And what did the leaked files show?
They revealed that regardless of whether a startup was hosting their infrastructure on Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud Platform, Microsoft Azure, or even a lightweight platform like Vercel.
Let me guess. They all had the exact same description,
Word for word, the exact same description of their network segmentation.
which is technically incoherent. You cannot describe an AWS virtual private cloud with its specific security groups and IAM roles using the exact same terminology you use for an Azure VNet.
No, they operate on completely different networking
But
paradigms.
the only way that happens is if.
If you have written a Python script that blindly auto-populates a generic text block into a PDF template and just slaps an auditor's digital signature at the bottom.
Which completely incinerates the strict independence rules mandated by the AICPA, right? The American Institute of Certified Public Accountants.
Totally. The core tenet of an audit is that the auditor must be independent of the entity they are auditing.
Right. They have to independently design the test procedures, pull the evidence themselves, and form their own conclusions.
But the leaked spreadsheet proved that Dell's internal software was pre-writing the auditor's final conclusion.
Literally generating the text, no exceptions noted, before the client had even submitted their infrastructure diagrams.
The verdict was rendered before the trial even began.
And the legal liability of that pre-written verdict is massive, especially when it bleeds into the public market.
Oh, for sure.
Because the sources highlight a company in the leak called Duo's Edge, right?
Yes.
And they are a subsidiary of a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ.
Yes. A messy startup failure to potential securities fraud.
Right, because under Sarbanes-Oxley and standard SEC disclosure rules, publicly traded companies cannot materially misrepresent their cyber risk profile.
And Duo's Edge used Delve to generate their SOC2. In their management assertion, the legal preface where executives swear to the accuracy of the report, they claimed they were audited against 5 distinct trust services criteria.
Security, availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy.
Right. They told their shareholders and the broader market that an independent firm had aggressively stress-tested their infrastructure across all 5 of those domains.
But when forensic accountants actually looked at Section 4 of that specific report, the section where the auditor lists the tests they performed.
It only contained testing procedures for one single criterion, security.
Unbelievable.
The tests, the evidence, and the conclusions for availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy simply did not exist in the document. They were phantom claims.
For a publicly traded entity to push a document to enterprise buyers claiming a 5-criteria audit when they only paid for 1 is a massive misrepresentation.
Huge.
Now, Delve didn't take this leak lying down. The CEO, Karun Kaushik, immediately deployed this crisis PR strategy.
He sent an email to their entire client base.
Right, and he claimed the exposing email from Deep Delver was AI-generated and that the underlying allegations were falsified.
It is the modern equivalent of claiming your Twitter account was hacked. You just throw out the buzzword AI generated to make the whistleblower look like a deepfake campaign.
And you rely on the assumption that your clients are too busy trying to ship their own product to actually open the Google Sheet and verify the metadata.
Exactly. But the digital forensics on that spreadsheet are undeniable. Deep Delver found a test row in the database where the contact email was skullcaller@gmail.com.
And that is the personal Gmail address of Silan Kokalar, the co-founder of Delve.
Yep. And researchers tied that specific email address to a former chapter president role she held years prior.
So you can't even claim it was a rogue junior engineer or a glitch in the staging environment.
No. The founders of the company were actively operating the master template that was fabricating auditor conclusions. They were at the keyboard, generating the fiction.
Which brings us to the most critical failure point in this entire ecosystem. Because Delve can generate all the Python scripted PDFs they want. But a PDF has 0 legal or commercial weight unless it carries the signature of an accredited independent CPA firm.
Exactly.
So who on earth were the auditors willing to sign their names to 259 identical reports claiming 0 personnel changes?
This is where we uncover the auditor shell game.
Okay, let's get into this. Because Delve explicitly promised their clients in writing that they partnered exclusively with the best and most respected US-based audit firms.
They used that claim to justify their premium pricing. But the reality of their back-end routing was completely different. The Deep Delver investigation mapped the metadata of the reports and found that over 99% of Delve's SOC2 and ISO audits were being funneled through just 2 obscure firms.
A Corp and Gradient.
Right. And when investigative journalists started pulling the business registrations for a Corp and Gradient, the illusion of the respected US-based firm instantly evaporated.
They were offshore certification mills, weren't they?
Entirely. The sources detail how they maintained the facade of a US presence. Gradient's primary corporate address traced back to a registered agent in Sheridan, Wyoming.
Ah, Sheridan, Wyoming.
It
If you know corporate structuring, you know Sheridan.
It is a notorious mail drop service location. It is heavily utilized by individuals who need to spin up anonymous LLCs, often for less than reputable reasons, because Wyoming law allows for extreme corporate opacity.
And what about their secondary address?
Gradient's secondary address was literally a residential house in a Texas suburb.
Wow. And a corp.
A corp was no better. Their listed U.S. headquarters resolved to a tiny single-room office space utilized by a solo tax practitioner operating under a completely unrelated business name.
So the actual auditing, the rubber stamping of the Delve templates, was happening offshore in massive volume.
Exactly. And the credentials of the individuals supposedly doing this work were completely fabricated.
Right, like the woman they found in the API logs.
Jayshree Dutta.
Yes.
API logs showed her assigned as the lead auditor for multiple different clients across completely different regulatory frameworks like SOC 2 and ISO 27001.
And she appeared to be executing these audits simultaneously for multiple competing audit firms on the Delve backend.
Which is physically impossible. Furthermore, they couldn't find any record of her actually holding an active U.S. CPA license.
So these aren't independent audit firms competing on the merits of their rigorous testing.
No, they are a networked cluster of interchangeable shell companies designed to blindly sign whatever JSON payload the Delve server sends them.
We really have to look at the macroeconomic forces that created this because the sources, especially the CISO Marketplace article, point out a fundamental shift in the industry. It's Goodhart's law, right?
Precisely, Goodhart's law. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure.
Explain how that applies here.
Historically, the measure of a secure company was passing a massive, grueling audit from a Big Four accounting firm. That could cost anywhere from $50,000 to well over $100,000 and take 6 months of dedicated engineering time.
So the badge was just a byproduct of the actual hard security work.
Right. But the sauce explosion flipped the incentive. Startups needed the badge to sell the software, so the badge became the target.
And when the badge becomes the target, the market optimizes for speed and cost. You see these boutique compliance shops and platforms like Delve promising the exact same certification for what? $8,000 to $15,000?
And that extreme price compression destroys the integrity of the audit. If a firm is only charging $8,000 for a SOC 2 Type 2, they mathematically cannot afford to spend the requisite 200 hours of expert engineer analysis to verify the infrastructure.
They'd be losing money on every deal.
Exactly. The only way the unit economics of that transaction work is if the auditor spends virtually 0 hours on the review. They have to operate as a high-volume signature factory.
Which leads to this terrifying dynamic of compliance as a product.
Yeah, the auditor is no longer an independent watchdog. They become a downstream revenue channel for the sauce vendor.
And this creates a devastating conflict of interest. Because imagine Delve sends a high-paying startup client to a corp. If a corp actually does their job, if they reject the auto-generated board meeting minutes, if they demand to see actual MDM telemetry, and they ultimately fail the client, what happens?
The startup CEO screams at Delve, demands a refund, and churns off the platform. Delve loses the recurring revenue.
Exactly. So if a corp acts with integrity, they actively harm Delve's business model.
Therefore, Delve will simply route future clients to a different shell firm that doesn't ask questions. The survival incentive for the auditor is to pass everyone with 0 friction.
So the platform is the corrupt teacher handing out the answer key, and the auditor is the principal looking the other way because they get a cut of the tuition.
That is exactly what it is. And this poison is so pervasive that it even infects the legitimate players in the space.
Like the story about Lovable.
Right. Lovable is a highly respected AI development platform. They use Delve software, but they were assigned to a legitimate, high-quality U.S. audit firm called Prescient Assurance.
So they didn't get routed to the Wyoming mail drop.
They didn't. But because Lovable was utilizing Delve's infrastructure to manage their compliance evidence, Delve's platform fed Prescient Assurance the exact same fabricated, templated Section 3 network descriptions and pre-generated risk assessments.
Wow, so Prescient executed a real audit, but they were evaluating entirely poisoned evidence.
Exactly, which completely undermines the defense that you just need to hire a better auditor. If the data ingestion layer is fabricating reality, The auditor is blind.
The absolute commoditization of trust here is just staggering, and to illustrate just how far this has fallen, the deep dive sources document a researcher actually texting one of the directors of Gradient Certification.
Yeah, a man named Kumar Garal.
They were texting him on WhatsApp.
Yes. The researcher engaged in a text message negotiation over a consumer messaging app to purchase a bundle of enterprise security certifications.
And they haggled the price of a combined SOC 2 and ISO 27001 certification down to less than $2,000.
Less than $2,000.
You have Fortune 500 banks relying on these frameworks to protect global financial data, and the cryptographic proof of that security is being haggled like a used car over WhatsApp.
It completely devalues the currency of enterprise trust. But, the critical takeaway here is that this isn't just a bureaucratic tragedy.
Yeah.
When you optimize entirely for the paper badge and you bypass the actual security engineering, you leave your physical infrastructure completely exposed. You are building a bank vault out of cardboard and painting it to look like steel.
And in March of 2026, a threat actor walked up to one of those cardboard vaults and simply pushed it over.
Yes.
Which brings us to the most devastating consequence of the Delve scandal.
Yeah.
The LiteLLM supply chain attack.
This is where the compliance theater crashes violently into adversarial reality.
Okay, let's establish what LiteLLM is and why its infrastructure is so highly privileged.
Because it's huge, right? It's massive. LiteLLM is essentially the central nervous system for modern AI application development. It is an open source AI routing tool.
Meaning what exactly for a developer?
Meaning if you are building an application that needs to send prompts to OpenAI and then maybe route a different task to Anthropic's Claude and then hit an Azure AI endpoint, you don't write custom integration code for all three. You use LiteLLM as a unified proxy.
So LiteLLM sits directly in the data path of some of the most sensitive corporate information in the world.
Yes. It processes proprietary source code, customer support transcripts, internal financial queries, all the stuff being fed into these language models.
And its adoption is massive. The sources say it handles over 3 million daily downloads on the Python Package Index, or PyPI.
And Wiz Research reported that LiteLLM is actively deployed in 36% of all cloud environments globally.
36%. That is not a niche developer utility. That is foundational load-bearing infrastructure.
Absolutely. And on the LiteLLM website, they prominently displayed their SOC 2 and ISO 27001 badges generated by the Delve machine.
Of course. They broadcasted to their enterprise users that they had undergone rigorous independent security validation.
But because that validation was a rubber stamp, their internal security culture was practically non-existent. And the specific vulnerability that triggered this entire collapse was their secret management.
They committed the ultimate sin of CI/CD pipeline management.
Yeah.
They stored their primary PyPI publishing token as a plain text environment variable.
We really need to unpack the technical severity of this.
Let's do.
In a modern development environment, your CI/CD pipeline, continuous integration, and continuous deployment is the automated factory that builds your code, runs the tests, and publishes the final software to the world.
Right.
To publish an update to PyPI, the pipeline needs a cryptographic token, a master key.
And in a secure environment, how is that supposed to be handled?
That token should be stored in an encrypted vault, like HashiCorp Vault or AWS Secrets Manager. The pipeline requests the token dynamically, uses it in memory for a fraction of a second, and then the token disappears.
But LM didn't do that.
No, they simply hard-coded the token in plain text in their GitHub Actions environment.
It's just sitting there as readable text.
Yep. Any script that executed within that pipeline runner had the ability to simply read the environment variables and steal the master key to their 3 million download-a-day empire.
And a legitimate SOC2 audit would have instantly flagged plaintext secrets in a build environment as a critical, show-stopping failure.
Instantly. But the Delve template didn't care, and the Indian shell auditor didn't look, so the key was just sitting there waiting.
And a highly sophisticated threat actor, tracked as Team PCP, found a way into that pipeline.
They did. Between March 19th and March 27th, 2026, Team PCP executed a brilliant and deeply ironic supply chain attack.
Ironic because they didn't actually attack LiteLM directly.
No, they went after the security tools LiteLM was using to maintain the illusion of compliance.
Oh, this part is just, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Team PCP found a vulnerability in a tool called Trivy.
Yes. Trivy is one of the most widely deployed open-source container and infrastructure vulnerability scanners in the cloud ecosystem.
So if you need to check the continuous vulnerability scanning box for your fake SOC2 audit,
you very likely install Trivy in your GitHub Actions pipeline to scan your code before it ships.
So the threat actors literally attacked the vulnerability scanner.
They did. Team PCP exploited a misconfiguration in Trivy's own GitHub Actions environment. They managed to execute malicious code within Trivy's privileged build runner, which allowed them to steal a release token and publish a compromised, backdoored version of the Trivy scanner.
To the public registry.
Yes. And because LiteLLM, along with thousands of other companies, had automated their pipelines to always pull the latest version of Trivy to prove they were secure.
Their automated factory unknowingly reached out and downloaded the compromised scanner.
The compliance requirement essentially forced them to download the malware.
The vulnerability scanner injected the vulnerability. It's like your antivirus software downloading a virus.
Exactly. And once the poison Trivy scanner executed inside LiteLLM's GitHub Actions runner, the Team PCP payload woke up.
It looked around the environment, read the local variables, and instantly found that plaintext PyPI publishing token just sitting there, unprotected.
So Team PCP exfiltrated that master token and then used it to cryptographically sign and publish their own malicious versions of LiteLLM directly to the official PyPI registry.
Specifically versions 1.82.7 and 1.82.8.
Yes.
And because 3 million systems automatically pull updates for LiteLLM every single day, the blast radius was instantaneous. Let's dig into the actual malware payload that Team PCP shipped inside LiteLLM, because the reverse engineering reports show a highly sophisticated 3-layer architecture.
Yeah, it was very well designed. Layer 1 was built for immediate silent exfiltration.
So the second it downloads, it runs.
Right. The moment the compromised LiteLLM package was imported into a victim's cloud environment, the payload executed. It captured the entirety of the local environment variables.
Which, as we just learned, often contain database passwords and API keys.
Exactly. It encrypted that data using a hybrid cryptography model, leveraging AES-256 for the data payload and RSA for the key exchange.
Ensuring that even if network defenders captured the outbound traffic, they couldn't read it.
Right. It packaged all of those encrypted secrets into an archive and silently shipped them out to an attacker-controlled command and control server.
That is brutal. It strips the environment of its keys in milliseconds. What does Layer 2 do?
Layer 2 was the Hunter module. It actively crawled the infected infrastructure looking for high-value persistence vectors.
Meaning what?
Meaning it specifically targeted the default credential paths for AWS and Google Cloud Platform. It looked for SSH keys in the DOS directories. But most dangerously, it targeted Kubernetes.
Oh, wow. It went after the orchestration layer.
Yes, it specifically queried the Varon secrets Kubernetes.io service account path to steal the local cluster tokens.
Wow.
And it didn't just steal them. It actively queried the cloud provider's metadata APIs to validate the permissions of the keys it found, mapping out exactly what level of access it had achieved.
It was literally strip mining the cloud environment.
Yes.
And then Layer 3 locks the door behind them.
Exactly. Layer 3 established deep, long-term persistence. The malware dropped a Python script named sysmin.py deep within the system directories and configured it to run as a background system service.
Which sounds incredibly legitimate to a casual observer. System monitor Python.
Oh, completely. It blends right in with normal Linux operating system noise. This sysmin.py script acted as a beacon.
A beacon.
Yeah, every 50 minutes, it would quietly reach out to the Team PCP infrastructure and ask if there were any new secondary payloads to execute.
Effectively turning the compromised cloud server into a persistent zombie node within the attacker's botnet.
Exactly.
The scale of this compromise is hard to overstate. Mandiant's incident response teams released an advisory warning that over 1,000 massive SaaS environments were definitively infected within days.
With projections estimating up to 10,000 downstream corporate victims.
And because the initial exfiltration captured cloud credentials, Mandiant observed a massive, highly visible extortion wave linked to the Lapsus hacking collective, utilizing the keys stolen by the LiteLLM payload.
It represents the total catastrophic failure of the trust chain. The compliance badge that enterprises relied on was fabricated by Delve. The security scanner required by that compliance framework was compromised and weaponized, and standard cloud monitoring tools completely missed the beaconing activity because the malware operated within trusted developer environments.
Which brings up a fascinating point from the threat intelligence sources. If the standard monitoring tools missed the beaconing, and the vulnerability scanner was literally the delivery mechanism, how did the security industry actually catch this massive supply chain attack?
You'd think it was some advanced heuristic, right?
Maybe like an AI threat hunter or something.
No, it was caught by pure blind luck and incredibly sloppy coding on the part of the attackers.
Really? What happened?
A research scientist named Callum McMahon happened to download the compromised version of LiteLLM onto his local development machine. And instead of silently exfiltrating his keys, the malware encountered an unhandled exception in its own code, and it physically crashed his computer.
The malware had a bug in it.
Yes. Andrej Karpathy, the highly respected AI researcher, analyzed the malicious code that Team PCP deployed, and he coined a perfect term for it. He called it vibe-coded.
Vibe-coded. I love that. What does that mean in this context?
It's brilliant. The structure of the Python payload strongly indicated that the threat actors didn't write the malware from scratch. They likely used a large language model, like ChatGPT or Claude, and rapidly prompted it to generate the exfiltration and persistence scripts.
Ah, so they were vibe coding, throwing prompts at an AI until it produced a script that mostly worked and then shipping it without rigorous testing.
Exactly, and that lack of testing was their downfall. The AI-generated malware didn't properly handle specific operating system edge cases, so when it hit Callum McMahon's machine, it panicked and crashed the system.
So the attacker's own AI-induced coding error was the only reason the global cybersecurity industry realized a foundational piece of the cloud had been backdoored.
Which is a chilling realization. A multi-billion-dollar ecosystem wasn't saved by its multi-million-dollar defensive posture. It was saved by a typo in a hacker's AI prompt.
And that realization brings us to the fallout. Because the House of Cards has violently collapsed, the enterprise world now knows that Delve was a fabrication machine, and they know that the exact type of compliance theater Delve sold directly enabled the LiteLLM disaster.
Right.
So what is Delve saying? How do you possibly defend this?
Dell's defense strategy has been to double down on denial while engaging in aggressive semantic gymnastics.
Let's hear the defense, because I really want to unpack the legal arguments here.
Okay, so they published a formal 5-point rebuttal to the allegations raised by the Deep Delver leak. Their primary defenses rested on 3 pillars. First, they explicitly claim that Delve, as a software company, does not conduct audits. They merely provide the software platform that independent auditors use.
Ah, so they are attempting to shift the liability entirely onto the shell companies like Gradient.
Exactly. Second, they addressed the identical nature of the 493 leak reports by blaming standardization.
Okay, let's stop right there and address that. Why does the standardization defense completely fail based on the forensic evidence we just discussed?
Because it fundamentally misrepresents what an audit is. Standardization explains why 259 reports might have the same chapter titles, or why they use a similar legal boilerplate in the introduction.
Right.
It does absolutely nothing to explain why 259 companies across vastly different sectors, healthcare, finance, AI, all had the exact same grammatical typos in their custom network descriptions.
Right. Standardization does not freeze time and magically prevent any employees from quitting their jobs across hundreds of companies for 12 straight months.
Exactly. It is a defense that assumes the reader has no understanding of statistical probability. And their third defense was perhaps the most audacious.
What did they say?
They claimed that the pre-populated drafts, the fake board meeting minutes, and the pre-written incident logs were not fake evidence, but were merely starting templates that the customer was legally responsible for finalizing and making accurate.
Wow. They are shifting the blame to the startups for using the very tool they sold them.
Yep.
They built a platform optimized with one-click adopt buttons for fake evidence. They incentivize speed and frictionless progression over accuracy, and when the music stopped, they pointed at the user and said, "You should have known better."
It is incredibly disingenuous, and the broader enterprise market seems to agree with that assessment because the customer exodus began almost immediately.
Right. The sources note that Lovable, the AI platform we mentioned earlier, that had their prescient audit poisoned, they didn't even wait for the scandal to break.
No, they publicly tweeted that they had organically abandoned Delve and migrated to a competitor, Vanta, months prior.
Which is a devastating market signal. They didn't churn because of the bad PR from the leak. They churned because the product itself was so fundamentally flawed and unusable in a real-world engineering context that they had to rip it out.
But what about the companies that stayed?
Right. What about the hundreds of startups whose trust pages are currently powered by Delve and whose enterprise contracts are predicated on those fake SOC2 reports? What is their real-world liability now that the curtain has been pulled back?
The downstream liability is severe. particularly for any company that utilized Delve to process data regulated by strict federal or international privacy laws like HITLA in the United States or the GDPR in the European Union.
Let's talk about the implications of that. If I am a digital health startup processing patient data, and I bought Delve to handle my compliance.
You are in a highly precarious legal position. The Office for Civil Rights, which enforces healthcare privacy regulations, operates under a strict standard regarding third-party vendor risk management.
So you can't just say, oops, our vendor lied to us.
No. The defense of "we didn't know our compliance vendor was faking the evidence" does not absolve the covered entity. If a startup is handling protected health information and they generated a fabricated risk assessment or adopted fake security policies through the Delph platform, they could face federal charges of willful neglect.
Willful neglect is not a slap on the wrist. That carries potential criminal liability.
It does. And under international frameworks like GDPR, regulators have the authority to levy fines of up to 4% of a company's global annual revenue if they determine the organization materially misrepresented its data protection controls to European citizens.
4% of global revenue could bankrupt a startup.
Easily. These startups purchased Delve with the explicit goal of reducing their enterprise risk, and the platform effectively acted as a multiplier, exponentially increasing their legal and regulatory exposure.
So if you are listening to this right now, if you are a chief information security officer, a procurement manager, or a technical founder trying to navigate this minefield, what is the actionable intelligence here? How do you actually verify that a vendor's security posture is real in an ecosystem flooded with fabricated PDFs?
The threat intelligence from CISO Marketplace provides a very rigorous, almost defensive verification framework. The primary directive is that you can no longer trust a badge rendered on a website, and you cannot blindly trust a PDF handed to you by a vendor.
You have to dig deeper.
You must interrogate the source. First, you have to identify the specific CPA firm that physically signed the attestation.
You have to look past the Delve logo and find the gradient or a corp signature.
Correct. And then you verify that firm. You look up their registration with state accountancy boards. You verify if they are operating out of a legitimate commercial headquarters or if their address traces back to a Wyoming registered agent mail drop.
So you have to do the background check on the background checker.
Yes. Second, you must aggressively read Section 4 of the SOC2 report.
Okay, what is in Section 4?
This is the granular section where the auditor lists the specific testing procedures they performed. You have to reject generic, auto-generated boilerplate like no exceptions noted.
You need to look for concrete sample sizes.
Exactly. Did the auditor pull a sample of 50 newly provisioned laptops to verify MDM installation, or did they accept a single screenshot?
You're looking for the mathematical proof of the work.
Yes. Third, you must interrogate the independence of the audit. Was the auditor contracted and paid directly by the startup, or were they a white-labeled subcontractor paid by the compliance software platform?
Because if it's the latter, the conflict of interest is too high.
Exactly. And finally, the ultimate analog verification. Pick up the phone.
Just call them.
Physically call the listed audit firm and demand verbal confirmation that they actually executed the engagement and stand behind the report.
I have to point out the ultimate crushing irony of that advice.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
The entire multi-million-dollar pitch of Delve and the broader compliance as a service market was that they were going to make trust fast, automated, and frictionless.
Right.
And the solution to the catastrophe they caused is for highly paid CISOs to manually read 100-page PDFs, cross-reference state licensing databases, and physically call auditors on the telephone. We have circled right back to the slow, painful manual verification process we spent billions of venture capital dollars trying to escape.
We have. And it is a necessary regression. Because the fundamental lesson of the Delve scandal is that trust cannot be fully automated. When you attempt to automate the verification of human behavior and systemic risk, and you tie commercial incentives to that automation, you inevitably end up automating deception.
And vendors have a lot of sophisticated, perfectly legal tricks to hide that deception from procurement teams, don't they? The sources mention the carve-out method as a major blind spot.
Yes, the carve-out method is a critical concept for anyone reviewing vendor risk.
How does that work in practice?
It is a perfectly legal accounting mechanism where a vendor intentionally removes their most critical, complex infrastructure from the scope of the audit.
Give me an example.
So a SaaS company might receive a pristine, clean SOC2 report. But if you read the fine print in the scope definition, the report will explicitly state, we did not test the security configurations of their underlying Amazon Web Services environment, we did not test their third-party identity provider, and we did not test their external logging infrastructure.
So they got an A+ on the exam, but the exam was only testing how well they locked the front door of the office, while explicitly ignoring the massive open loading dock in the back where all the actual data lives.
Precisely. And if the procurement analyst only looks at the green checkmark and doesn't read the scope exclusions, they assume the entire infrastructure is validated. It is legal misdirection.
Wow. This has been an incredible, deeply troubling journey today.
It really is a wake-up call.
We started by looking at the intoxicating, heavily funded promises of an AI startup led by Silicon Valley darlings who claim they could automate security.
And we peeled back the UI to uncover a massive, unauthenticated Google spreadsheet filled with hundreds of identical fabricated reports and fake board meetings.
We traced how offshore certification mills rubber-stamped those lies from empty residential houses in Texas.
And finally, we saw the catastrophic real-world result.
How this exact illusion of compliance allowed a plain-text API key to sit exposed, leading to the devastating compromise of LiteLLM, a tool deeply embedded in a third of the global cloud via hijacked security scanner.
It is the ultimate manifestation of the danger we face when the tech industry prioritizes the appearance of security over the grueling, unglamorous reality of engineering it.
And it leaves us with a final, chilling concept to explore, something that wasn't explicitly spelled out in the incident reports, but that looms heavily over this entire disaster.
What's that?
If we look at the mechanics of the LiteLLM attack, threat actors like Team PCP are now actively using large language models to rapidly vibe code highly destructive multi-layered exfiltration malware.
Right.
At the exact same time, defenders and vendors are relying on platforms like Delve that use automation and AI wrappers to generate fake compliance reports and illusory trust pages.
So you have AI on both sides.
Exactly. If you extrapolate this trend, are we rapidly approaching an era where human oversight is entirely removed from the cybersecurity loop?
That is a terrifying thought.
When malicious algorithms are actively probing and attacking defensive algorithms, and automated templates are blindly auditing other automated templates, who is actually guarding the underlying data?
It is the most profound risk of the next decade. If the machines are fighting the machines in the background and the human operators are simply trading auto-generated PDFs that assure each other everything is perfectly fine, the infrastructure is completely, silently undefended.
Which brings us right back to your own infrastructure. If you are procuring software to store your life's work, your customers' proprietary data, and your company's future, you cannot afford to outsource your trust to a dashboard.
You really can.
Do not just accept the pristine, gold-sealed report from an automated inspector. Dig into the scope. Verify the credentials. Look for the plaintext secrets yourself. Keep questioning the reality behind the green check marks you see online. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and we'll see you next time.